The Clone Wars ended, the Separatist government collapsed, but the Munificent-class frigate didn't die. It just changed owners, because, as it turns out, Munificents are born to be pirate ships. The case for that begins with the hardware, because the hardware explains everything that followed. Hoersch-Kessel Drive Inc. and Gwori Revolutionary Industries built the Munificent-class to 825 meters in length, 426 meters wide, 243 meters tall. At those dimensions, it qualifies as a capital ship without qualification, shorter than a Venator-class Star Destroyer, longer than anything a single planetary government could field comfortably, but carrying a weapons loadout that the size gap doesn't begin to justify. At its prow, 2 forward-mounted heavy turbolaser cannons, officially designated as prow heavy turbolaser cannons in canonical sources, oversized, fixed-forward weapons built specifically for this class and the Recusant-class destroyers. Documented capability: blast melting an ice moon 1,000 kilometers in diameter, or piercing the deflector shields of a 10-kilometer-wide Grade 3 battle station. Behind those sit 2 long-range heavy ion cannons for disabling capital ship systems, 26 twin light turbolaser cannons, 20 light turbolaser turrets, 8 medium flak guns, and 40 retractable point defense laser cannons for anti-fighter coverage. A hyperwave jammer in the electronics suite to blind enemy sensors and targeting systems. A note on the bow gun terminology, because it matters to anyone who knows this ship well. The community shorthand, super heavy turbolasers, is frequently applied to those forward weapons, and the instinct is understandable given the documented output. The canonical designation in official sources is prow heavy turbolaser cannon. That distinction is a detail. The Ice Moon capability isn't. What makes the Munificent genuinely remarkable isn't just the weapons count, it's the crew number those weapons sat on top of. A nominal crew of 200 personnel ran this ship. 200 people for 825 meters of warship. That figure exists because the Munificent was never really designed around organic crew in any conventional sense. Its skeletal architecture, tensor fields running along the longitudinal spines to maintain structural integrity, minimal hull plating over vast open internal sections, wide hollow forward areas, was built to be operated by droids. The organic crew were there for maintenance, navigation, and senior command functions. The ship's remaining interior space went toward carrying 150,000 deactivated B-1 battle droids held in stasis, a full ground army, stored in the hull and deployable on demand. 4 squadrons of Vulture droid starfighters were held within those same forward hollow sections. A Class 1 hyperdrive ensured rapid transit across star systems, backed by a Class 10 emergency unit. Cargo capacity ran to 40,000 metric tons, enough for sustained independent operations, and consumable stores lasted 2 years without resupply. Think about what that combination means for any operator who isn't a major galactic government. An 825-meter warship with prow guns rated against battle stations, crewable by 200 specialists without a navy behind them, carrying a reactivatable ground force and 4 fighter squadrons internally, with enough speed to disengage from anything it can't destroy, and enough supplies to operate indefinitely in remote space. No support infrastructure required, no fleet train, no forward operating base. The Munificent was built to project force independently, and that design philosophy, built for a corporate client with no standing navy, operated in regions where Republic support would never arrive, turned out to have value far beyond the banking sector that commissioned it. Before the war ends and the factions change, one design observation worth 30 seconds of attention. The command tower rises from the bow in stepped, tiered platforms, wide panoramic windows on each level tapering upward to the ship commander's station at the pyramid's apex, a turbolift shaft connecting each level internally. In the 1930s, the Imperial Japanese Navy rebuilt its capital ships with what naval historians call pagoda masts, multi-tiered fire control and observation platforms stacked on tripod structures to maximize the visual horizon across the open ocean. The Fuso and Yamashiro carried the most elaborate versions: rangefinder stations, spotting platforms, fire direction centers, climbing tier by tier toward a commanding summit. Whether Hoersch-Kessel's designers were consciously invoking that aesthetic isn't on record, but a Fuso-class battleship in profile, alongside a Munificent bow-on, isn't a comparison that requires much explanation. The Clone Wars animated series gave this ship a complicated legacy, and the audience frustration is legitimate. Munificents appear throughout as standard Separatist fleet assets, and they go down regularly. Flanked in asteroid fields, broken by boarding actions, dispatched in the background while Republic heroes do something narratively interesting elsewhere. The Malevolence, the Subjugator-class heavy cruiser with ion pulse cannons, received a dedicated 3-episode arc in Season 1. Munificents were background fleet. The Bothawai engagement from 22 BBY is worth examining specifically, because it gets misread as a hardware failure. Grievous led 6 Munificent-class frigates through an asteroid belt, with all power diverted to their forward shields, because his battle droids calculated the asteroids would protect the unshielded sterns. AT walkers that Anakin Skywalker had positioned on those asteroids opened fire on the exposed rear sections. All 6 frigates down, Grievous proceeding to make his retreat from his personal frigate. The lesson drawn from that outcome is usually, Munificents are fragile. The lesson is actually, B-1 battle droids followed their programmed threat assessment and couldn't adapt when Skywalker violated it. The hardware performed exactly as designed until the moment tactical droids failed to account for a flank that human creativity exploited. Clone troopers were engineered and trained for military service from birth, led by officers like Rex and Cody, who systematically identified and exploited the predictability of droid programming. They didn't outgun the Munificents at Bothawai. They outthought the operators running them. TF-1726's squadron at the Battle of Quell in 21 BBY shows the other side of that equation. When that T-Series tactical droid managed the engagement, his Munificents destroyed 2 of General Aayla Secura's Venator-class Star Destroyers before Republic reinforcements arrived under Skywalker, and destroyed the 3rd as the survivors were evacuating. 3 Venators to a Munificent-led squadron. The show moved past that outcome quickly, but it happened, and it demonstrates what these ships could do against matched opposition under effective command. Post-war Munificents would be crewed by organic personnel who could think. The hardware didn't change. Everything else did. Order 66 arrived in 19 BBY. The broadcast signal deactivated the droid army simultaneously across the galaxy. Within days, the Separatist government was dead, its leadership killed on Mustafar, its political structure dissolved, its war over. Overnight, an enormous fleet of warships had no government to report to, no chain of command to receive orders from, and no purpose within a structure that no longer existed. The Empire's response was systematic scrapping. Bracca, the starship graveyard visible in Jedi Fallen Order, Lucrehulk hulls rusting in open atmosphere, picked over by salvagers, is the documented face of that policy. The intention was to deny surviving Separatist hardware to any potential future opposition, consolidate military production under Imperial control, and eliminate the material basis for any CIS revival. The problem was scale. The CIS Navy at the Battle of Coruscant numbered in the thousands of vessels. Tracking, intercepting, and physically scrapping every Munificent across the Outer Rim in the immediate aftermath of a galactic war, with a transitional military still reorganizing from the Republic structure, was logistically impractical. Ships in deep space patrol assignments, vessels in Outer Rim systems where Imperial presence was still establishing itself, ships crewed by officers who had reasons to disappear. Many of them did disappear. The organic crew members who had served aboard these ships chose what came next. Navigators, engineers, senior tactical officers who knew their hulls in detail, people who had spent years aboard these frigates, took their ships past the Empire's reach rather than surrender them to disposal. They became pirates. They became mercenaries. Some stayed with Separatist holdout elements that continued operating for years, documented in canon. General Kalani's super tactical droid and his droid forces appear in Star Wars Rebels, still functional, still waiting, years after Order 66. The pattern of fractured CIS military elements refusing absorption into the Imperial structure is established across multiple sources. The ships that escaped with those crews weren't random selections. Organic officers chose the vessels they knew, and the vessel most common in the CIS fleet, most widely deployed, most likely to have experienced crew aboard at any given moment, was the Munificent. Exhibit A in the post-war record, the Lost Clusters, New Republic era. Decades after Mustafar, well into the period following the Battle of Endor in 4 ABY, the pirate Gruk was running criminal operations out of a remote region of space called the Lost Clusters. His ship was a Munificent-class frigate. Not a purpose-built criminal vessel, not a refurbished civilian transport. A Clone Wars-era capital warship, fully armed, operationally functional, crewed and commanded by a pirate organization that had apparently maintained it well enough to remain viable 20-plus years after the government that originally commissioned it ceased to exist. Gruk had prow guns capable of piercing battle station shields, 4 fighter squadrons in the hull, and enough cargo space to sustain extended deep space operations. He used it as a pirate would use a warship, as a platform from which to operate with genuine military credibility in a region where the New Republic's reach was limited. Sidon Ithano, the Crimson Corsair, a masked pirate of significant operational reputation, sent his crew to seize Gruk's vessel. They succeeded. The Munificent changed hands from one criminal organization to another. What Ithano's crew intended to do next is the detail that matters most. They planned to use the captured Munificent to locate other surviving CIS craft. Not to decommission it, not to strip its weapons and sell them. To use one Clone Wars-era frigate as the operational base for finding more Clone Wars-era frigates. The embedded logic of that plan is that Ithano's crew had enough intelligence about surviving CIS hardware to believe a dedicated search campaign was viable, that there were enough Munificents and other vessels still out there to make the operation worthwhile. Gruk's ship wasn't a surprise discovery. It was evidence of an inventory. That inventory had been building since 19 BBY. Across the Imperial era, numerous mercenary and pirate groups operated Munificents in small numbers. The record is consistent on the pattern even where it's thin on individual names. The Onaka Gang, the Weequay pirate organization led by Hondo Onaka, whose career spans the Clone Wars through the Imperial era, is confirmed in sources to have operated at least one Munificent at some point, though whether that predates or follows Order 66 isn't fully established from available evidence. Treat it as probable, given the timing of his career and the documented pattern. What is unambiguous is that the hardware kept appearing across decades in criminal hands, which means it kept being worth acquiring. The reason it was worth acquiring is the same reason those organic crews defected with it in the first place. An 825-meter warship that runs on 200 people is a rare and valuable instrument in any political era. Major galactic governments field warships at that size by the thousands, but they can do so because they have thousands of trained crew, logistics chains, fleet bases, and maintenance infrastructure. Non-state operators don't. A pirate organization or mercenary contractor maxing out at a few hundred personnel can't crew a Star Destroyer. They can crew a Munificent. And a Munificent, for anyone who can crew it, brings capital-grade firepower to any negotiation. The kind of firepower that means the other party generally doesn't call your bluff. Add the reactivatable droid ground force for boarding operations and surface raids. Add the fighter squadrons for pursuit suppression and escort engagement. Add the Class 1 hyperdrive for extraction faster than most pursuit options could match. Add the 40,000 metric ton cargo holds for the actual revenue of piracy. The Munificent didn't become a pirate ship because pirates had no better options. It became one because it was purpose-built for independent operation in a way that most warships aren't. And every feature that made it suitable for a banking cartel operating without Republic support made it equally suitable for a criminal organization operating without Imperial support. The Clone Wars established the contracted operator precedent directly. Cad Bane at the Battle of Deveron commanded 4 Munificent-class frigates supplied to him by the Trade Federation. He wasn't a naval officer. He was the most expensive bounty hunter available, given capital-grade assets to execute a specific mission objective. The client provided the platform. The operator provided the expertise. 4 825-meter warships, deployed on a contracted basis to a non-state actor for a defined operational goal. What contemporary strategic analysis would call a private military company arrangement. The term the Star Wars galaxy doesn't use, but the practice it absolutely recognizes. Ran on munificent hardware from the Clone Wars onward. The corporate sector authority in Legends documents the institutional version. A semi-autonomous corporate entity controlling more than 30,000 star systems in the Outer Rim, independent of the Empire in practical governance, maintaining a security division with its own capital ship picket fleet for what amounted to corporate military operations. Their documented fleet drew from multiple eras and included Separatist hardware, Recusant-class light destroyers, Lucrehulk-class battleships, alongside Imperial surplus stock. Direct confirmation that Munificents specifically entered CSA service isn't in the available record, so that remains inference rather than established fact. But a corporate security organization systematically acquiring surplus CIS warships, choosing the hardware that runs on the smallest possible crew for the largest possible hull, would find the Munificent an obvious acquisition. The Rebel Alliance represents the final and most consequential exhibit in the post-war record. Surviving Munificents reached Rebel Alliance service during the Galactic Civil War. In Legends, the confirmation is explicit, and the modification detail is the significant part. The Rebellion rebuilt these ships so extensively that the finished vessels barely resembled their original designs. That isn't a minor refit. Stripping a capital ship to the point of near unrecognizability means new weapon mounts, new internal configurations, new systems integration, skilled labor, scarce components, and engineering time that a resource-constrained insurgency allocated deliberately. The Rebellion didn't rebuild these ships because they had nothing better to do with their engineers. They rebuilt them because the underlying hull was worth saving. The Munificent-class command, control, and communications variant, the C3 frigate subtype, is specifically documented in Legends as a configuration used in Rebel-owned forces, carrying forward-mounted weapons and 2 years of consumables. That variant's existence in Rebel service is consistent with the Alliance's documented approach to CIS hardware. Take the available platform, configure it for current operational needs, deploy it. The canon evidence for active Rebel use is thinner. Star Wars Rebels, Season 3, Episode 18, Secret Cargo, shows the Ghost crew sheltering near the wreckage of a Munificent-class frigate while waiting to rendezvous with Senator Mon Mothma during the early Alliance formation period. Wreckage, not an active warship. Canon shows a dead Munificent at the edge of Rebellion-era space. Legends documents the operational ones. Both tell the same story from different angles. These ships were present across the Galactic Civil War era because enough of them had survived Imperial scrapping to remain in circulation. Some went down in battles, became wreckage near Rebel waypoints. Others were rebuilt and flew under Alliance colors. The Rebel Alliance's broader procurement pattern puts all of this in context. The Alliance used stolen CR-90 corvettes, liberated Hammerhead corvettes, arranged through Senator Organa's network, Y-Wings raided from a decommissioning station, Mon Cala cruisers, Providence-class warships including the Rebel 1, Lucrehulk carriers including the Fortressa. A genuinely mixed fleet, drawing from 3 separate galactic eras. Munificents weren't exceptions to that approach. they were consistent with it. There is a clean irony in the endpoint that the evidence supports, even if the script shouldn't name it as such. A ship commissioned by the intergalactic banking clan, built to protect financial investments and fight the Galactic Republic, ended up in the fleet fighting the Galactic Empire. The regime that destroyed that republic centralized the banks and decided to scrap the Munificent fleet in the first place. The hardware outlasted the political verdict that condemned it. Most warships that lose their war become raw material. The Munificent became 3 separate post-war factions across at least 2 decades of continued service. Pirates in the Lost Clusters, contracted operators in the Outer Rim, a rebel alliance that valued the hull enough to rebuild it from the frame outward. The organic crews who defected in 19 BBY made a calculation. This hardware was worth more than whatever Imperial processing offered. Pirate Gruk, decades later, validated that calculation with his operations. Sidon Ithano's crew validated it by seizing his ship and using it to find more like it. The Rebel Alliance validated it by pouring engineering resources into holes they could have walked away from. The Clone Wars animated series showed Munificents going down under clone tactics and Republic creativity, and the frustration that generated. A ship this capable, treated as background, was well-founded. But the post-war galaxy rendered its own verdict over 20 years of continued service. 3 factions, multiple eras, a ship worth seizing, worth contracting, worth rebuilding. The verdict was consistent. Munificents are worth keeping. That's not a coincidence. That's a hardware record. Subscribe for more stories like this.